Some stories arrive like old friends at the door, familiar, expected, bearing gifts you already know. But the best ones, the ones that stay with you long after the last page turns, begin in places of dust and heartache. They find us in the hard moments when hope seems foolish and the road ahead stretches empty. This is a story for those who have known rejection, for those who have stood alone in unfamiliar places, wondering if they made the wrong choice, for those who learned, sometimes too late, and sometimes just in time. That the measure of a person has nothing to do with how they walk, and everything to do with what they do when no one is watching. It is a story about two broken people in the Arizona Territory. In the summer of 1884, and it begins, as such stories often do, with a train pulling into a station and a woman stepping down into a life she never expected. The heat pressed down like a hand on her shoulders as Eliza stepped off the train. She held the iron railing a moment longer than necessary, steadying herself against the familiar ache in her left leg. 18 years since the fall from the hayloft. 18 years of learning to move through a world that noticed her gait before it noticed anything else. The platform at Copper Springs was nothing but weathered boards and a single bench. A water barrel stood near the depot office, a tin dipper hanging from its lip. Beyond the station, the town sprawled in the afternoon glare, false-fronted buildings, a church steeple white against the brown hills, horses switching flies at hitching posts. Eliza scanned the faces. The daguerreotype in her pocket showed a stout man with a handlebar mustache, standing stiff-backed beside a wagon. Harlan Cobb, the man whose letters had been arriving in Ohio for 7 months. The man who had written, in careful script, that he needed a wife who could work hard and keep a home. That he did not care about beauty or fine manners, that he wanted a partner, plain and simple. She had written back that she was plain, that she could cook and clean and mend, that she had nursed her grandmother through 2 winters of fever, that she was not afraid of hard work. She had not mentioned her leg. A sin of omission, her mother called it. Eliza called it survival. Now she stood on the platform, trunk at her feet, and searched for a handlebar mustache. There, a man matching the photograph stood beside a buckboard at the edge of the platform. Brown vest, sun-weathered face, hat pushed back on his forehead. He was watching the passengers descend. His eyes moved past a family with 2 small children, past a drummer in a checkered suit, past an elderly woman clutching a carpet bag. They landed on Eliza. She raised her hand in a small wave and took a step forward. The moment her weight shifted to her left leg, his expression changed. It was subtle at first, a tightening around the mouth, a narrowing of the eyes. Then his gaze dropped to her feet, watching as she took another step, and another. The uneven rhythm unmistakable. Eliza kept walking. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her chin up, her pace steady. She had practiced this walk for 18 years. She knew how to make it look purposeful rather than pained. But Harlan Cobb was not watching her purpose. He was watching her limp. When she was 10 feet away, he shook his head. Just once, a small, definitive motion. Then he turned, climbed onto the buckboard, and snapped the reins. The wagon pulled away without a word. Eliza stood in the settling dust, her hand still half raised, and watched him go. The wheels creaked. The horse's hooves clopped against the packed earth. And then the buckboard turned the corner and disappeared behind the livery stable. Gone. She lowered her hand. Her fingers were trembling. She pressed them against her skirt to still them. Around her, the platform had mostly cleared. The family with children was loading into a hired hack. The drummer was haggling with a porter. The elderly woman had vanished into the depot office. Eliza stood alone with her trunk. The sun beat down on her bonnet. Sweat trickled down the back of her neck, soaking into the collar of her best calico dress, faded blue. Mended at the elbow, the nicest thing she owned. She had worn it to make a good impression. A fly buzzed near her ear. She did not swat it away. "Ma'am." The voice came from behind her. She turned to find an elderly man in a railroad cap. His face creased with concern. The station master, she guessed. His name tag read, E. Pruitt. "Ma'am, you got folks coming for you." Eliza looked at him. Then she looked at the empty street where the buckboard had vanished. Then she sat down on her trunk, removed her bonnet, and fanned herself slowly with it. "Not any more," she said. "I reckon not any more." Mr. Pruitt shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "That was Harlan Cobb's wagon, wasn't it?" "It was. And you're the lady he sent for from back east. Ohio." She kept fanning. The motion gave her something to do with her hands. "I'm the lady he sent for. And I'm the lady he decided he didn't want. After all." The station master's mouth pressed into a thin line. He glanced down at her leg, then quickly away. And Eliza knew he understood exactly what had happened. "That ain't right," he muttered. "Man oughta at least say something. Oughta at least have the decency to. It's done." Eliza's voice was flat. She could not afford the luxury of anger. Anger required energy. And energy required money. And money was the one thing she had almost none of. "Is there a boarding house in town, somewhere respectable?" "Widow Harmon takes boarders. 50 cents a night? Meals included." Eliza opened the small drawstring purse tucked into her sleeve. She counted the coins inside by touch. $2.37. Everything she had left in the world. 4 nights at 50 cents would leave her with 37 cents. 4 nights to figure out what came next. "Where would I find Mrs. Harmon?" Mr. Pruitt pointed down the main street. "Third house past the Mercantile. Yellow shutters. Can't miss it." Eliza stood, tucking the purse back into her sleeve. She bent to grip the rope handle of her trunk. Then paused. "Mr. Pruitt, is there work to be had around here? For a woman?" He scratched his jaw, thinking. "The hotel might need kitchen help, and—" He hesitated. "There's a place about 2 miles out, the Holloway Ranch. Man, there's been poorly since the dust storm hit back in spring. His hands quit on him, and the docs stopped making visits." He shook his head. "But that's hard country for a woman alone. And Holloway, well, he ain't got much to pay with neither." Eliza looked out past the edge of town, where the land rose into brown hills dotted with scrub. 2 miles, on her leg, in this heat, carrying a trunk, impossible. But then again, so was everything else. "Thank you," she said. "I'll think on it." She lifted her trunk heavier than she remembered. Or maybe she was just tired, and began the slow walk toward the yellow shutters. Behind her, Mr. Pruitt called out, Ma'am, what Cobb did that ain't how most folks are. You remember that? Eliza did not turn around. She just kept walking. If you have ever known what it means to start over in an unfamiliar place, I would love to hear where you are reading from today, and may your road rise to meet you, wherever it leads. The Holloway Ranch looked like something the land was trying to swallow. Eliza stood at the edge of the property, her canteen nearly empty, her left leg throbbing from the 2-mile walk. She had set out at dawn, before the worst of the heat, resting twice in the thin shade of mesquite trees. Now the sun hung halfway up the sky, and what lay before her made her stomach tighten. Shutters hung crooked on rusted hinges. The front porch sagged in the middle. A vegetable garden sprawled beside the house, overgrown with weeds. But she could see the yellow of late squash, the green of tomato vines gone wild. Not dead, just forgotten. In the corral, a bay mare stood with her head low, ribs pressed against dull coat. Flies clustered at her eyes. No smoke from the chimney. No sound but the clucking of chickens scratching in the dirt. Eliza wiped the sweat from her forehead and walked toward the house. Her knock echoed. No answer. She knocked again. The door swung inward on its own, hinges groaning. The smell hit her first. Sour. Wrong. The smell of sickness trapped in a closed room. Of sweat and something worse underneath something her grandmother had taught her to recognize. Eliza pressed her hand over her nose and stepped inside. A man lay on a cot against the far wall. He was maybe 30, maybe older, hard to tell with his face slack and gray, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. His shirt was soaked through, the fabric clinging to his chest with every shallow breath. His left arm lay across his stomach, wrapped in rags that had once been white. Eliza crossed the room. Her fingers found his forehead, burning. She peeled back the edge of the bandage. The smell sharpened rot and infection, unmistakable. Beneath the filthy cloth, his forearm was swollen tight, the skin angry red, and crawling up from the wound, past his wrist, creeping toward his elbow red streaks, thin as spider silk, the creeping death. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. Once it reaches the heart, there's nothing to be done. 2 miles back to town, 2 more hours. At least, maybe 3. She looked at the man's face. His cracked lips moved, forming words she could not hear. He might not have 2 hours. Eliza found the well pump behind the house. It groaned when she worked the handle, then coughed out rust-colored water that slowly ran clear. She filled the basin and carried it inside, her leg protesting every step. The stove was cold, dead ashes. She scraped them out, found kindling in a box beside the hearth, and struck a match from the tin on the mantel. The wood caught. She fed it larger pieces until the fire held steady, then set the basin on top to heat. The man on the cot had not moved. She searched the kitchen, a cracked bar of lye soap on the washstand, a half-empty bottle of whiskey in the cupboard. Clean rags, none. She looked down at her petticoat, the white cotton her mother had hemmed before she left Ohio. Her scissors were in the trunk she had left at Mrs. Harmon's boarding house. She found a paring knife in a drawer, tested the edge against her thumb, and began to cut. The fabric tore in long strips. She folded them, set them beside the heating water, and turned back to the cot. His arm first. She had to see what she was dealing with. The old bandages came away in pieces, stuck to the wound with dried blood and pus. She worked slowly, soaking each section with warm water before peeling it back. The man groaned, but did not wake. His head turned on the pillow, lips moving around words she could not hear. The wound itself was ugly, a gash across the meat of his forearm, maybe 4 inches long, deep enough to see the white of tissue beneath. The edges were swollen, weeping yellow fluid, and the smell made her eyes water. The red lines had climbed past his wrist now, thin as thread, reaching toward his elbow. She dipped a clean rag in the hot water, added soap, and began to scrub. He screamed. His good arm swung up, wild, and caught her across the cheek. The basin flew from her hands, water splashing across the floor. Eliza stumbled back, her hip hitting the edge of the table. For a moment, they stared at each other, she standing, hand pressed to her stinging face. He half risen on the cot, eyes unfocused and terrified. "Margaret," he rasped. "Margaret, the cattle—" "Hush now." She kept her voice low, steady. "Ain't no Margaret here, just me." His eyes searched her face without recognition. Then the strength went out of him, and he collapsed back onto the mattress, chest heaving. Eliza picked up the basin, refilled it, heated it again. This time, when she cleaned the wound, she pinned his good arm beneath her knee. The first day blurred into evening. She applied hot compresses to draw the infection out, pressing the steaming cloths against his swollen flesh until they cooled, then heating them again. Her grandmother had taught her this, the slow, patient work of pulling poison from a wound. No lancing, no cutting, just heat and pressure and time, when the worst of the pus had drained. She washed the wound again with soap and whiskey. He cursed and thrashed, but did not fully wake. She wrapped his arm in clean strips of her petticoat and tied them firm. Then she brewed willow bark tea. There was bark in a jar on the shelf. Someone had gathered it. Once. The woman whose shawl hung on a hook by the door. Maybe. The one who had stitched the sampler on the wall. Margaret Holloway, 1879. Sister, Eliza guessed. Or wife. Either way, gone now. She steeped the bark until the water turned brown, then carried the cup to the cot. Getting the tea into him was harder than cleaning the wound. His jaw clenched, his head turned away. She cupped his chin, forced his mouth open, and poured in small sips. He choked, swallowed, choked again. Half the tea ended up on his shirt. Half went down his throat. It would have to be enough. Night fell. The kerosene lamp burned low. She found tallow candles in a drawer and lit 2, setting them on the table where their glow reached the cot. The man's fever climbed. His skin burned under her palm. Sweat soaked through the mattress. He muttered names she did not know. Margaret. Always Margaret. And sometimes a man's name. Thomas or Tobias. She could not tell which. Eliza sat in the chair beside him and talked. She talked about Ohio, about her grandmother's kitchen, the smell of bread baking in the winter, about the letters from Harlan Cobb, how they had arrived every month for 7 months, how she had read them so many times the paper wore thin at the folds, about the train ride west, 3 days of dust and strangers, and her leg aching in the cramped seat. She talked about the station platform, about standing there with her trunk while the buckboard drove away. He didn't even say nothing, she said. Her voice came out rough with exhaustion. Just looked at my leg and left, like I wasn't worth the breath. The man on the cot did not answer, but his thrashing had stilled. His breathing had slowed. The second night was worse. His fever spiked so high that his whole body shook. Eliza soaked rags in cool water and laid them across his forehead, his chest, his neck. She changed the bandages twice when yellow fluid seeped through. She forced more willow bark tea past his cracked lips, drop by drop, until her arms ached from holding his head. By the third dawn, she had not slept more than an hour at a time. She sat slumped in the chair, her hand resting on his good arm, watching the light creep across the floor. The candles had burned to stubs. The fire had gone to embers. She was too tired to rebuild it. Then she felt it, the sudden cooling of his skin, the sweat turning clammy instead of burning. His face, gray for so long, taking on a faint flush of color. The fever had broken. She leaned back in the chair and closed her eyes. Just for a moment. Just until she could gather the strength to check his bandages. She woke to a voice. "Who are you?" Her eyes opened. Morning light filled the room. The man on the cot was watching her, his gaze clear and sharp and deeply suspicious. Eliza straightened, her neck stiff, her whole body aching. She was too tired for clever answers. "Name's Eliza. I was supposed to marry Harlan Cobb, but he didn't want me. Now I'm here." She paused. "You ain't dead yet, so I reckon that's something." He stared at her. His jaw worked like he was chewing on words he could not quite form. "You Cobb's woman was supposed to be." He took one look at my leg and changed his mind. A long silence. His eyes dropped to her feet, then came back to her face. "Cobb's a fool," he said finally. "That's what I figured too." He tried to sit up and gasped, his hand flying to his bandaged arm. His face went white. "Easy." Eliza pressed him back down. "You've been real sick. Blood poisoning. You're through the worst, but that arm's gonna need tending for a good while yet." He looked at the clean bandages, at her face, at the strips of white cotton wrapped around his forearm. "Is that—" His voice cracked. "Is that a petticoat? Was—" She smoothed down her skirt. "Seemed like you needed it more than I did." He lay back against the pillow. His eyes found the sampler on the wall, and something in his face closed off. "Margaret," he said. "You asked about Margaret." Eliza had not asked. She had only said the name while he was delirious, but she held her tongue and waited. The days took on a rhythm. Dawn Eliza woke in the chair beside the cot, her neck stiff, her back aching. She checked Gideon's bandages, changed them if the cloth had yellowed overnight, then pumped water for the basin and set it to heat on the stove. Morning, she cooked what she could find. Beans from a sack in the larder. Cornmeal she mixed with water and fried in the bacon grease left in a tin by the stove. Coffee, black and bitter, brewed in a dented pot. Gideon ate without comment. He watched her move around the kitchen, his eyes following her uneven gait. But he said nothing about it. He said nothing about much of anything. By the fourth day, he could sit up on his own. By the sixth, he made it to the chair by the window. Eliza scrubbed the kitchen floor. The wood had gone gray with grime. Footprints tracked across it in patterns she could read from the door to the stove. From the stove to the cot. Nowhere else. The same path walked over and over by a man who had stopped caring about the rest. She got down on her knees with a brush and a bucket of soapy water. The bristles scraped against the boards. Dirty water pooled in the cracks, and she soaked it up with rags, wrung them out, kept scrubbing. "You don't have to do that." Gideon's voice came from the chair by the window. She did not look up. "Floor's filthy. Been filthy for months. Another day won't matter." "Matters to me." She heard him shift in the chair, but did not hear him argue further. When she finally sat back on her heels, the wood grain showed through pale and clean, the color of honey. The windows came next. She washed them inside and out, standing on a crate to reach the top panes. The glass was so coated with dust that she had to scrub twice before the light came through properly. When she finished, the afternoon sun fell across the floor in bright squares, and the room looked like a different place entirely. Gideon watched from his chair. His expression gave nothing away. On the 7th day, she found the vegetable garden. It sprawled behind the house, bordered by a sagging fence meant to keep out rabbits. Weeds had taken over most of it, bindweed and pigweed and something with thorns she did not recognize. But underneath the tangle, she found survivors. Tomatoes. Split and overripe on the vine. Yellow squash the size of her forearm. Onions with their green tops flopped over in the dirt. She spent the morning on her knees, pulling weeds, salvaging what she could. Her hands turned black with soil. Sweat dripped down her temples and soaked through her dress. Her leg throbbed from crouching. But she kept working until she had a basket full of vegetables and a cleared patch of earth. That evening, she made soup. Real soup, tomatoes and onions and squash, simmered with salt and a pinch of pepper she found in a jar on the shelf. She served it in chipped bowls with cornbread on the side, the bread golden and steaming from the oven. Gideon took a bite of the cornbread, chewed, swallowed. His hand stopped halfway to the bowl. "When's the last time you ate something that wasn't cold beans?" Eliza asked. He did not answer right away. His eyes stayed on the cornbread, on the yellow crumbs scattered across his plate. "Can't recall," he said finally. "Well, that's about to change." She turned back to her own bowl, giving him privacy, but she heard him take another bite. And another. And when she glanced over, he was scraping up the last crumbs with his finger, pressing them against his tongue like he was trying to memorize the taste. His eyes were closed. She looked away before he opened them. On the 8th day, he told her about Margaret. She had not asked again. She had learned, in the long hours of tending him, that pushing only made him retreat further. So she waited, and she worked, and she let the silence stretch between them like a rope with plenty of slack. They were sitting on the porch, he in a chair she had dragged out from the kitchen. She on the top step, her bad leg stretched out in front of her. The sun was setting, the sky turning colors she had no names for. "My sister," he said. "Margaret was my sister." Eliza turned her head slightly but did not speak. "Fever took her 2 years back. She was all the family I had left." He paused. "She made that sampler when she was 12. Used to hang in our mother's kitchen, back in Texas, when Ma died. Margaret took it with her." "I'm sorry. Don't be." His voice was flat. "Everybody dies. She just did it sooner than most. Eliza looked out at the darkening hills. A coyote called somewhere in the distance, and another answered. "That cornbread," Gideon said. "My ma used to make it like that. Everybody's ma made it like that. Ain't nothing special." Didn't say it was special. He picked at a splinter on the arm of his chair. Said it was good. She felt his eyes on her, then not on her face, but lower, on her leg, stretched out on the step. "How'd it happen?" he asked. She could have deflected, could have changed the subject, the way she had learned to do in Ohio when people stared too long or asked too many questions. But something in his voice, the same flatness he had used when talking about Margaret, made her answer straight. "Hayloft. I was 8. The ladder broke, and I fell wrong. Shattered the bone in 3 places." She shrugged. "Doc said it best he could, but it never healed right. Grew up crooked." Gideon nodded slowly. He did not say he was sorry. He did not offer sympathy or advice or any of the things people usually said when they learned about her leg. He just nodded, like she had told him the weather. It was the kindest response she had ever received. The next morning, she washed the checkered curtains she had found balled up in a corner. They had been white once, she thought, or maybe cream. Now they were gray with dust and spotted with something that might have been grease or might have been mold. She scrubbed them in the basin, wrung them out, and hung them on the line behind the house. When they dried, she ironed them with the sad iron she heated on the stove, pressing out the wrinkles until the fabric lay smooth. The curtains went back up in the kitchen window. The afternoon light filtered through them. Softer now, gentler. Gideon stood in the doorway, watching. "Looks different," he said. "Looks like somebody lives here." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "The dust storm hit 3 months back, killed half my cattle, rest scattered to the hills, and I couldn't track them alone. Hands quit when I couldn't pay." He leaned against the doorframe. His good arm braced against the wood. "I was out riding fence when the second storm came through. Horse spooked, threw me into the wire. That's how I got the arm." Eliza kept her eyes on the curtains, adjusting the folds. "And then you just lay here for 3 months. Wasn't 3 months. First month, I could still work. Second month, the infection started. By the time it got bad..." He stopped. "By then, I figured it didn't matter much one way or the other." She turned to look at him. His face was thin, the bones sharp under the skin. His eyes were the color of creek water, gray-green and murky. "You wanted to die," she said. Not a question. He did not answer. He did not have to. Eliza smoothed down her apron. Her hands were rough now, the knuckles cracked, the nails broken short. Working hands, her grandmother's hands. "Well," she said, "I reckon it's a good thing I showed up when I did." She walked past him into the kitchen, her gait uneven, her chin high. Behind her, she heard him draw a breath like he was about to speak. But when she glanced back, he was staring at the curtains, his expression unreadable. That night, she found the root cellar. The door was hidden beneath a tangle of dead vines on the north side of the house. She pulled them away, lifted the heavy wooden hatch, and descended the ladder into darkness. The cellar smelled of earth and something else, something sweet and faintly rotten. She struck a match, held it up, and counted the shapes in the flickering light. Mason jars lined the shelves, dozens of them, preserved tomatoes, green beans, peaches in syrup, A woman's work, careful and thorough. Margaret's work, and in the far corner, stacked against the wall, a pile of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. 3 weeks in. Gideon's arm had healed enough to be useful. The wound had closed clean. The red streaks faded to nothing. He still favored it, held it close to his body when he walked, winced when he lifted anything heavier than a coffee cup. But the worst was behind him. Eliza found him at the chicken coop on a Tuesday morning. The structure leaned badly to the south, 2 boards missing from the back wall, the door hanging by a single hinge. Chickens wandered in and out through the gaps, scratching in the dirt, utterly unconcerned with the state of their shelter. Gideon stood before the coop with a hammer in his good hand and a board propped against his hip. He was staring at the missing section like it had personally wronged him. "You gonna fix it, or just look at it?" He turned. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Thinking about how to hold the board and swing the hammer at the same time. Eliza walked over, her gait uneven on the rough ground. She took the board from his hip and positioned it against the gap, holding it flush with the frame. "I'll hold. You hammer." He looked at her for a moment. Then he fished a handful of nails from his pocket, 16 penny, rusted at the heads, and set the first one against the wood. The hammer swung. The nail bit in. He swung again, driving it home. They worked in silence. She held the boards steady while he nailed them in place. Moving around the coop section by section, the sun climbed higher. Sweat trickled down her temples and soaked into the collar of her dress. "Hand me that hammer," she said when they reached the door. He raised an eyebrow. "You gonna say please, or we doing this the hard way?" Something flickered in his eyes, almost amusement. "Please!" She took the hammer and pounded the hinge back into alignment while he held the door. The impact jarred her shoulder with each swing, but the nails went in straight. When she finished, the door swung smooth and latched with a solid click. Gideon tested it twice. Open, closed, open, closed. "Not bad," he said. "My grandmother taught me. She could build a barn if she had to. Sounds like a woman I'd have liked to meet. You'd have been scared of her. Everybody was." He did not argue the point. The days found their shape after that. Eliza cooked, cleaned, tended the garden. She mended clothes she found in the trunk by Gideon's bed shirts with frayed collars, trousers with worn knees. Her stitches were small and even, almost invisible against the faded fabric. Gideon cared for the animals. The bay mare, Sadie, he called her, had filled out under regular feeding, her coat regaining its shine. He walked her each morning, checking her hooves, brushing the dust from her flanks. They ate together, worked together, sat on the porch in the evenings, and watched the sun go down. One afternoon, Eliza found the books. They were stacked on a shelf in the corner of the main room, half hidden behind a pile of old newspapers. She had dusted that shelf a dozen times without really looking at it. But today, with nothing else demanding her attention, she pulled the books out one by one. Shakespeare, the binding worn, the pages soft with handling. Dickens, Great Expectations, and Oliver Twist, both well-thumbed. A worn Bible with names written inside the front cover in faded ink. "You read all these?" Gideon was sitting by the window, whittling a piece of wood into something that might have been a spoon. He looked up at her question. "Margaret taught me. Said a man who can't read is only half alive." Smart woman. She was. Eliza turned the Bible over in her hands. The names inside were listed in a column: Thomas Holloway. B. 1825. Sarah Holloway. B. 1830. Gideon Holloway. B. 1852. Margaret Holloway. B. 1856. Two names had been crossed out with a single black line. Thomas. Sarah. The third, Margaret, remained untouched. No death date recorded, as if putting it in ink would make it too real. She set the Bible back on the shelf without comment. "You can read too," Gideon said. It was not a question. "And write, and do sums." She straightened the stack of books, aligning their spines. "My grandmother said a woman who can't keep her own accounts is at the mercy of any man who can. Your grandmother sounds like she was something." "She was." Gideon set down his whittling. His eyes stayed on her face. Thoughtful. "You ain't just some farm girl from Ohio." Eliza did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. She just walked past him to the kitchen, where the coffee pot sat waiting on the stove. The mare escaped on a Thursday. Eliza was hanging laundry on the line when she heard Gideon shout. She dropped the shirt in her hands and limped around the corner of the house to find him standing by the corral, the gate swinging open, the fence behind it sporting a gap the size of a man's torso. "I fixed that fence," he said. His voice was flat with disbelief. "I fixed that fence last week." "Where'd she go?" He pointed toward the hills. Eliza shaded her eyes and saw the mare, a brown shape, moving fast through the scrub, tail high, clearly pleased with herself. "Well," she picked up her skirt with one hand, "best go get her." They walked together. Gideon's longer stride ate up the ground, but he slowed to match her pace without being asked. The mare had stopped maybe a quarter-mile out, cropping at a patch of wild grass like she had nowhere else to be. "Easy now," Gideon murmured as they approached. "Easy, girl." Sadie raised her head, ears pricked. She watched them come closer, closer. Then she bolted. They chased her for 20 minutes. Eliza's leg burned with every step, but she kept moving, circling wide while Gideon came at the mare from the other side. Twice, they almost had her. Twice, she dodged away, snorting. The third time, Eliza cut off her escape route by waving her arms and shouting. The mare wheeled, confused, and Gideon caught her halter. "Got you," he panted. "Got you, you ornery." He stopped, looked at Eliza. She was bent over, hands on her knees, gasping for breath, her hair coming loose from its pins and hanging in her face. And she was laughing. The sound surprised her as much as it surprised him. She had not laughed, really laughed, the kind that came from deep in the belly in longer than she could remember. But something about the absurdity of it, the two of them, chasing a horse through the Arizona scrub like a pair of fools, broke something loose inside her. Gideon stared at her for a moment. Then the corner of his mouth twitched. Then he was laughing too. The sound rusty with disuse, but unmistakable. They walked back to the ranch with Sadie between them, the mare's head hanging in equine shame. Neither spoke. They did not need to. That evening, he brought out the harmonica. Eliza was sitting on the porch step, her legs stretched out, watching the colors drain from the sky. She heard the door open behind her, heard Gideon settle into the chair, heard a soft, metallic clink. Then a note. Wavering. Uncertain. Another note. higher. A fragment of melody that might have been a hymn, or might have been something else entirely. She did not turn around. She just listened as he found his way through the tune, the notes growing steadier, the melody taking shape. Without thinking, she began to hum along. They sat like that, as the stars came out, she humming, he playing, the music rising into the darkness like smoke. When the song ended, neither spoke. The silence felt different now, fuller. "Eliza." She turned. He was looking at her, the harmonica still in his hands. "That's the first time you've said my name," she said. "Is it without Miss in front of it?" "Yes." He turned the harmonica over in his fingers. The metal caught the last light from the dying sky. Seemed like it was time. She rose from the step, meaning to go inside, to check on the bread she had left rising. Her foot caught on a loose board near the well pump. Her weight shifted wrong. She stumbled. His hand caught her elbow. The grip was firm. Careful, he had used his bad arm. She realized, and the strength in it surprised her. For a breath, neither moved. She could feel the calluses on his palm through the thin fabric of her sleeve, could feel the warmth of his fingers. "Thank you," she said. "Careful of that board. I will." He let go. She walked inside without looking back, but she could still feel the warmth where his hand had been, and she caught herself pressing her palm against the spot, as if she could hold it there. Dangerous, she thought. Dangerous territory. She pushed the thought away and went to check on the bread. The next morning, she rode Sadie into town for supplies. The ride into Copper Springs took an hour. Eliza had not been on a horse in years, not since before the accident, when her father had lifted her onto the old plow mare and led her around the paddock. Sadie's gait was smoother than she remembered horses being, the rhythm steady beneath her, but her legs still ached from gripping the saddle by the time the town came into view. She had tried to refuse the money. Gideon had pressed the coins into her hand that morning, $3.40, counted out on the kitchen table, his last savings. She knew. Everything he had left. "Take 2, she said, pushing back the extra. "I don't need more than that. Take it all. Get what you need. I need flour and salt and coffee. That's $1, maybe less. Keep the rest." He had looked at her for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then he had swept the extra coins back into his palm without another word. Now she rode down the main street of Copper Springs with $2 in her pocket and a list in her head. Flour, salt, coffee, bacon, if the price was fair, maybe a little sugar, if there was enough left over. The hitching post outside Perkins Mercantile was crowded, 3 horses already tied there, a buckboard parked at the end. Eliza dismounted carefully, favoring her leg, and looped Sadie's reins around the rail. The bell above the door jingled as she entered. The smell hit her first dried goods and pickle brine and something sweet she could not identify. The store was larger than she expected. Shelves lining both walls, barrels and crates stacked in the aisles. A glass case near the counter displayed penny candy in neat rows, peppermint sticks, lemon drops, horehound. 2 women stood near the fabric bolts at the back. They turned when the bell rang, their eyes moving over Eliza with quick assessment, her faded dress, her worn boots, the way she shifted her weight to ease the ache in her leg. One of them whispered something to the other. The other nodded. Eliza walked to the counter. The storekeeper was a thin man with spectacles and a balding head. He looked up from his ledger as she approached, his expression neutral. "Help you? Flour, please, 5 pounds, and salt a pound, coffee if you have it." He moved along the shelves, pulling down a sack of flour, scooping salt into a paper cone, measuring coffee beans into a tin. His movements were efficient, practiced. He did not look at her face. "That'll be $1.12. Eliza counted out the coins. Her fingers brushed his palm as she handed them over. He pulled back quickly, like she had burned him. "Thank you kindly," she said. He swept the coins into the register and turned away, already reaching for his ledger. Dismissed. Eliza gathered her goods and turned toward the door. The 2 women at the fabric bolts had not moved. They were watching her with the particular intensity of people who wanted to be sure they remembered every detail. She recognized one of them. The gray hair, the sharp nose, the mouth pinched like she had been sucking lemons. Mrs. Cobb, Harlan's mother. Eliza had seen her portrait in one of the letters of family gathering. The whole Cobb clan arranged on a porch. Mrs. Cobb seated in the center like a queen on her throne. Their eyes met. Mrs. Cobb did not look away. She held Eliza's gaze for a long moment, her expression flat and cold. Then she turned to her companion and spoke in a voice pitched to Carrie. "Living out there alone with him. No ring on her finger. And her limping around like that." She shook her head slowly. Some women got no shame at all. The words hit Eliza like a slap. Her hand was resting on a bolt of calico blue, the color of the sky just before dusk. She had not meant to touch it, had not meant to linger, but now her fingers had frozen against the fabric, and she could not seem to make them move. The companion murmured something in response. Mrs. Cobb laughed, a small, mean sound. "Lord knows what she had to do to get him to take her in?" Eliza set the calico down. Her hands were steady. Her face was calm. She picked up her goods, tucked them under her arm, and walked to the door. The bell jingled as she pushed it open. The sunlight hit her face like a blow. She did not run. She did not cry. She walked to the hitching post, loaded her supplies into the saddlebags, and fumbled with the buckles until they closed. "Miss," the voice came from behind her. She turned to find an elderly man in a leather apron, his hands blackened with soot. The blacksmith she had seen his forge at the end of the street. "Let me help you with that." He took the saddlebag from her hands, adjusted the straps, secured them properly against Sadie's flank. His movements were gentle, unhurried. "Name's Tatum," he said. "Knew Gideon's daddy. Back in the day. Good man. His son's cut from the same cloth." Eliza did not trust herself to speak. Mr. Tatum straightened up, brushed his hands against his apron. His eyes were kind. "Don't let him get to you, miss. Small towns got small minds. Don't mean nothing." She nodded. Her throat was too tight for words. "Mrs. Harmon knows where you are if there's trouble. She's good people." He paused. "You take care now." He walked back to his forge without waiting for a response. The rhythmic clang of his hammer started up again, steady and sure. Eliza mounted Sadie and rode out of town without looking back. The ride home took longer than the ride in. She let Sadie set the pace, did not urge her faster, did not care how long it took. The sun beat down on her shoulders. Dust coated her dress, her hands, her face. She did not cry. She had learned long ago that crying did nothing. It did not change the shape of her leg, or the opinions of strangers, or the fact that she was 26 years old and had no home, no family, no future. So she did not cry. She just rode, and let the heat bake the hurt into something harder. Gideon was on the porch when she returned. He rose from the chair as she dismounted, came down the steps to take Sadie's reins. His eyes moved over her face, reading something there. Get what you needed. Yes. She unloaded the saddlebags herself. Flour, salt, coffee. She carried them inside, set them on the kitchen table, began putting them away. Gideon followed her to the doorway. He leaned against the frame, watching. Something happened in town. No. Eliza? I said no. Her voice came out sharper than she intended. She turned away, busying herself with the flour, pouring it into the tin canister by the stove. Her hands were shaking. She gripped the edge of the counter until they stopped. Gideon did not push. He stood in the doorway for a moment longer, then turned and walked back outside. She heard his boots on the porch, heard the chair creak as he sat down. She finished putting away the supplies, made dinner, served it in silence. They ate without speaking. The food tasted like nothing. That night, Eliza lay in the narrow bed in the room that had been Margaret's. The walls were thin. She could hear Gideon moving around in the main room, hear the creak of his cot as he settled in for the night. She reached for Margaret's shawl folded at the foot of the bed. The wool was soft against her fingers, the color of autumn leaves. She had found it on the hook by the door weeks ago. Tonight. She pulled it over her shoulders and breathed in the faint smell of lavender that still clung to the fibers. She pressed her face into the pillow. The tears came then hot and silent, soaking into the cotton. She cried for Ohio, for her grandmother, for the life she had thought she was coming to. She cried for the look on Mrs. Cobb's face, for the storekeeper's eyes sliding away, for the word shameful hanging in the air like smoke. She cried until there was nothing left, in the main room, on the other side of the thin wall. Gideon lay awake and listened. Gideon rode into town on a Wednesday morning. Eliza had argued against it. His arm was healed, but still weak, still prone to aching when he used it too long. And the heat was fierce September in Arizona, the sun hanging in a white sky like a blister ready to burst. I need seed, he said. Can't plant without seed. Then let me go. No. The word came out harder than he intended. He saw her flinch, saw her eyes drop to the floor. I mean, he rubbed the back of his neck. After what happened last time, the way they treated you, I won't have you going back there on my account. It's not your account. It's ours. He did not know what to say to that. So he saddled Sadie and rode out before the argument could continue. The town looked the same as always, false-fronted buildings baking in the sun, horses drowsing at hitching posts, a dog lying in the shade of the livery, too hot to move. Gideon tied Sadie outside the feed store and went in. The interior was dim after the brightness outside. Sacks of grain lined the walls, corn, wheat, barley. The smell of burlap and dried seed filled his nose. The owner, a man named Henley, looked up from behind the counter. Holloway, didn't expect to see you up and about. I need seed, corn and barley, enough for 10 acres. Henley scratched his chin. That's a fair amount. You got the hands to plant it. I'll manage. The sound was non-committal. Henley moved along the shelves, pulling down sacks, weighing them on the scale. Heard you got yourself some help out there. Woman from back east. Gideon's jaw tightened. That's right. Folks are talking. Folks can mind their own business. The door opened behind him. Gideon did not turn, but he saw Henley's eyes flick toward the entrance, saw his expression shift. Well, the voice was familiar, smooth and mocking. Look who finally crawled out of his hole. Gideon turned. Harlan Cobb stood in the doorway, his bulk blocking the light. He was dressed for town-clean shirt, polished boots, that ridiculous handlebar mustache waxed to sharp points. Cobb? Holloway. Cobb stepped inside, letting the door swing shut behind him. I was just telling my mother about you. She saw your woman in the mercantile the other day. Said she looked like something the cat dragged in. Gideon said nothing. His hands hung loose at his sides. That lame woman's making a fool of you. Holloway. Cobb's voice dropped, took on a tone of false concern. Living out there alone with her. No ring, no proper arrangement. People are starting to wonder what kind of man you are. People can wonder all they want. Can they? Cobb took another step closer. Your daddy was a respected man in this town. Built that ranch from nothing. And now his son's shacked up with some crippled cast-off, letting the place fall to ruin. He shook his head slowly. Send her back east where she belongs, before you lose whatever reputation you got left. The words hung in the air. Gideon could feel his pulse in his temples, feel the old familiar heat rising in his chest. He thought of Eliza, of the way she had looked when she came back from town face blank, hand steady, something broken behind her eyes. You talk about reputation, Gideon said quietly. You ordered a woman from Ohio, made her promises, then left her standing on a train platform because you didn't like the way she walked. Cobb's face reddened. That's different. How? She lied to me. Didn't mention she didn't lie. She just didn't think it mattered. Gideon took a step forward. And it shouldn't have, but you looked at her leg and decided that was all she was. A limp. He shook his head. The only fool I see in this room is you. Cobb's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Gideon thought he might swing. Part of him hoped for it, hoped for the excuse to let loose the rage that had been building since he heard Eliza crying through the wall. But Cobb did not swing. He just smiled a thin, mean smile. We'll see, he said. We'll see how long she lasts when folks won't do business with you, when the bank won't extend your credit, when every door in this town closes in your face. He turned and walked out, letting the door slam behind him. Gideon stood very still. His heart was hammering. His hands were shaking. Henley cleared his throat. About that seed, he said. I can't do credit. Not with, he gestured vaguely, not with how things are. Gideon reached into his pocket and pulled out the coins he had saved. Everything he had left. He counted them onto the counter. $1, $2, $3, $3.50. Cash, he said. How much will that get me? Henley looked at the coins, looked at Gideon's face. Something flickered in his expression. Shame. Maybe, or pity. 5 acres worth, he said finally. Maybe 6 if you stretch it thin. I'll take it. The ride home was long. Gideon kept Sadie at a walk, the saddlebags heavy with seed against her flanks. The sun beat down on his shoulders, sweat soaked through his shirt. He thought about Cobb's words, about the banker who would not meet his eyes, about the way Henley had looked at him like he was already a dead man, just too stubborn to lie down. He thought about Eliza. She had been right. He should not have gone. Should not have subjected himself to their stares and whispers. But the alternative. Letting her go back. Letting them look at her again the way they had looked at her before. No. He would not allow that. The ranch came into view. Smoke rose from the chimney. The curtains she had washed hung white and clean in the windows. Something was wrong. He knew it the moment he dismounted. The air felt different. Too still, too quiet. He pushed open the door. Eliza stood in the middle of the room. Her trunk open on the floor. Her spare dress lay folded inside. Her brush. Her Bible. The few things she owned in this world. She was packing. "What are you doing?" She did not look up. Her hands kept moving, folding, arranging, tucking things into corners. "I'm leaving." The word hit him like a fist to the gut. "No. I heard what happened in town." Her voice was flat, controlled. "Word travels fast. Mrs. Harmon sent a boy out with a message. Said you got into it with Cobb at the feed store. Said the whole town's talking. Let them talk. I will not." Her voice cracked. She stopped, pressed her hand against her mouth, collected herself. "I will not be the reason decent folks cross the street when they see you coming. Those folks ain't decent. They're all you got." She finally looked at him. Her eyes were dry, but the skin around them was raw. "I've been here 5 weeks. Gideon, 5 weeks. And I've already cost you your credit at the bank, your standing in town. And whatever chance you had of rebuilding this place, I'm poison to you. Can't you see that?" He stepped toward her. She stepped back. "Don't." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Don't make this harder than it already is. Eliza, I've got nothing." The words came faster now, tumbling over each other. "No family, no money, no prospects. I came out here to marry a man who didn't want me, and I ended up living off the charity of a stranger. And now that stranger is losing everything because of me." She pressed her palms against her eyes. "I can't do it anymore. I can't wake up every morning knowing that my being here is destroying you." Gideon stood very still. His chest ached. His throat was tight. He did not know what to say, had never been good with words. Not like Margaret, not like their mother. "You saved my life," he said finally. "And now I'm ruining it. No." He crossed the room in 2 strides, caught her hands, pulled them away from her face. "No. Listen to me." Her eyes were red. Her face was blotchy. She looked exhausted and ashamed and heartbroken all at once. "Those people in town," he said. "They don't matter. Cobb doesn't matter. The bank doesn't matter. None of it matters. Then what does—" The question hung between them. He could feel her pulse under his fingers, fast and uneven. Could see the fear in her eyes, not fear of him, but fear of hoping, fear of wanting something that might be taken away. "Stay," he said. "Not because you got nowhere else to go, because this is where you belong." She stared at him. Her lips parted. No sound came out. "Just—" His voice broke. He cleared his throat. "Just don't go. Not yet." A long moment passed. The clock on the mantel ticked. The fire crackled in the stove. Eliza pulled her hands free. She turned back to the trunk, looked at the clothes inside, neatly folded, ready for a journey. Then, slowly, she began to unpack. Gideon let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. But as he watched her hang her spare dress back on its hook, he saw something in her face that made his stomach drop. She was staying. But she had not said yes. The church social was on Sunday. Gideon told her on Saturday night, while they were sitting on the porch watching the last light drain from the sky. His voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather or the price of feed. "We're going." Eliza's hands stilled on the mending in her lap. "No. If we hide, they win. Let them win. I don't care anymore." "I do." She looked at him, then really looked. His jaw was set, his eyes fixed on the darkening hills. He had shaved that morning. She noticed, had trimmed his hair with the scissors from the kitchen drawer. "Gideon, they want us to be ashamed. They want us to skulk around like we done something wrong." He turned to face her. "We ain't done nothing wrong. And I won't let them make us act like we have." She did not sleep that night. She lay in the narrow bed in Margaret's room, staring at the ceiling, her stomach tight with dread. The thought of walking into that church hall, of feeling their eyes on her, hearing their whispers, made her want to crawl under the blankets and never come out. But when morning came, she got up. She washed her face. She put on her best dress, the faded blue calico, mended at the elbow, the nicest thing she owned. She had worn it the day she arrived. The day Harlan Cobb had looked at her leg and walked away. Gideon was waiting in the main room. He wore a white shirt she had not seen before, pressed and clean. A string tie hung around his neck, dark fabric, simply knotted. "That was my father's," he said. Catching her look, Margaret saved it after he passed. They did not speak on the ride into town. Mr. Tatum had loaned them his buckboard for the occasion had insisted. Actually, when he heard they were planning to attend, "Can't have a lady riding side saddle to a church social," he had said. "Ain't proper." The church hall stood at the end of Main Street, white-painted and plain. Wagons and horses crowded the yard. The sound of a fiddle drifted through the open doors. Accompanied by the murmur of voices, Gideon climbed down first, then turned to help Eliza. Her hand trembled as she took his arm. She could feel the calluses on his palm through her glove. "Ready?" "No, me neither." He tucked her hand into the crook of his elbow. "Let's go anyway." They walked through the doors together. The hall fell silent. It happened in a wave, conversations dying mid-sentence, heads turning, eyes fixing on the couple in the doorway. The fiddle player stopped mid-note, his bow hovering above the strings. Eliza felt every gaze like a physical weight. Her leg ached from the ride. And she knew her limp was more pronounced than usual. She wanted to turn around, wanted to run back to the buckboard and hide. Gideon's arm tightened against her hand. He did not slow down. They walked to the refreshment table. A glass pitcher of lemonade stood sweating in the heat. Gideon poured 2 glasses, handed one to Eliza, and turned to survey the room. No one approached. Families huddled in tight clusters, their backs turned. Women whispered behind their fans. Men studied the floor with sudden fascination. The fiddle started up again. Tentative. A few couples drifted toward the dancing area. The conversation resumed in low murmurs. And then Harlan Cobb pushed through the crowd. He was dressed in his Sunday best dark suit, polished boots. That ridiculous mustache waxed to sharp points. His mother followed a few steps behind, her face pinched with disapproval. "Well, well," Cobb's voice carried across the hall. "Look who finally showed his face. And brought his little, 'Careful now, Harlan.'" Gideon's voice was quiet. but it cut through the noise like a blade. "Next word out of your mouth better be, ma'am." Cobb stopped. His eyes narrowed. "Or what?" Gideon set down his lemonade glass. He turned to face Cobb fully, his shoulders square, his hands loose at his sides. "Or nothing. I ain't gonna hit you." He paused. "But I am gonna tell every person in this room exactly what kind of man you are, and I got a feeling they already know." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cobb's face reddened. "You got some nerve, Holloway. Coming in here with your charity case, acting like charity case." Gideon's voice rose slightly. Not shouting, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Is that what you call her?" He took a step forward. Cobb took a step back. "This woman walked 2 miles in the Arizona heat to help a stranger. Found me half dead on the floor of my own house. Blood poisoning so bad the doc had given up." Another step. "She cleaned my wound with her own petticoat. Sat up 3 nights straight brewing willow bark tea. Kept me alive when I had no reason to keep living." The hall had gone silent again. Even the fiddle player had stopped. "She worked without pay, without thanks, never once complained." Gideon's voice was steady now, each word precise. "She scrubbed my floors and washed my windows and planted my garden. She brought that ranch back from the dead with nothing but her 2 hands and her own sweat." He turned to face the crowd, to face Mrs. Cobb, standing rigid with fury, to face the storekeeper who would not meet Eliza's eyes, to face all of them. "You call her shameful. You look at her leg and decide that's all she is." He shook his head slowly. "The only shame I see in this room is a man who judges a woman's worth by the way she walks, instead of what she does with her hands." The silence stretched. Cobb's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Then Gideon turned back to him. His voice dropped, became almost conversational. "You ordered her from Ohio, Harlan. Made her promises. Told her you wanted a partner. Plain and simple. And then you took one look at her leg and left her standing on a train platform. Didn't even have the decency to say a word." He stepped closer. Close enough that Cobb had to tilt his head back to meet his eyes. "She's worth 10 of you. 20. And every person in this room knows it." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Cobb spun on his heel and walked out. His mother followed, her face white with rage. The door slammed behind them. The silence held. Eliza stood frozen by the refreshment table, her lemonade forgotten in her hand. Her chest was tight, her eyes burned. She did not know what to do, what to say, how to move. Then footsteps crossed the wooden floor. Mr. Tatum stopped in front of her. His face was weathered, kind. He extended his hand. "Miss," he said, "I knew Gideon's daddy. He'd be proud tonight." She took his hand. Her fingers were trembling, behind Mr. Tatum. The schoolmistress approached a thin woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She nodded at Eliza. A small, precise gesture of acknowledgement. Then the pastor's wife. Then a farmer Eliza did not recognize. Then a young mother with a baby on her hip. One by one. They came. Not many, perhaps a dozen, in a room of 50. But enough. Enough to form a small circle around Eliza and Gideon. To create a barrier against the whispers and stares. The fiddle started up again. Someone laughed. The tension in the room began to ease. Eliza looked at Gideon. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. "Why?" she asked. Her voice came out rough. "Why did you do that?" He did not answer right away. He picked up his lemonade, took a sip, Set it down again. Because it was true, he said finally. Because somebody needed to say it. And because... He stopped. His jaw worked. Because why? The fiddle played a slow waltz. Around them, couples began to move onto the dance floor. The lamplight flickered, casting shadows on the whitewashed walls. Gideon looked at her. Really looked. The way he had that first morning when he woke from the fever and found her sitting beside his bed. Because you deserved to hear it, he said quietly. Even if you don't believe it yet. The ride home was quiet. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and copper. Eliza sat beside Gideon on the buckboard seat, her hands folded in her lap, watching the colors shift and change. She did not know what to say. No one had ever done that for her. No one had ever stood in front of a room full of strangers and declared her worth. Her father had been a quiet man, her mother practical and unsentimental. Her grandmother had loved her. But love from kin was different, expected. This was something else entirely. Gideon pulled the wagon to a stop at the top of the ridge. Below them, the ranch spread out in the fading light, the house with its white curtains, the corral with Sadie drowsing by the fence, the garden she had coaxed back to life. Smoke rose from the chimney. She had left a pot of beans simmering on the stove. Gideon. He turned to look at her. What you said back there. About me. About what I did. She swallowed hard. You made it sound like what? Like I was something, somebody. He was quiet for a long moment. The horses stamped, impatient to be home. You are somebody, he said. You just ain't figured that out yet. She opened her mouth to respond. To argue. Maybe. To point out that she was a woman with a bad leg and no money and no family. That she had nothing to offer except a pair of working hands. But the words would not come. Instead, she looked at the ranch below them. At the lamp glowing in the window, the lamp she had filled that morning. The wick she had trimmed. At the life she had built here, piece by piece, without ever meaning to. I need to tell you something, Gideon said. His voice had changed, dropped lower, grown hesitant in a way she had never heard before. What? He did not answer right away. His hands tightened on the reins. His jaw worked like he was chewing on words he could not quite form. The sun touched the horizon. The sky blazed crimson. After Margaret died, he said finally, I stopped caring about the ranch, about the cattle, about whether I lived or died. Eliza held her breath. The dust storm. He stopped, started again. I saw it coming. Had time to get inside, to find shelter. His knuckles were white on the reins. I didn't move, just stood there and let it hit me. She understood then. The wound on his arm, the infection, the way he had been lying on the floor when she found him, like a man who had already given up. You wanted to die, she said. He did not deny it. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. The horses shifted in their traces. And now? Eliza asked. Gideon turned to look at her. His eyes were the color of creek water in the dying light. Now, he said slowly, I want to see what tomorrow looks like. The words hung in the air between them. Eliza did not move, did not breathe. The sunset blazed across the horizon, painting the desert in colors she had no names for: vermilion, amber, purple, so deep it was almost black. What do you mean? She asked. Gideon set the reins down. His hands moved to his lap, fingers lacing together. Unlacing. Lacing again. He stopped. Started over. After Margaret. I figured there wasn't no point. Ranch was failing anyway. Cattle dying, hands leaving. I was just waiting for the land to take back what it gave. He turned to look at her. The dying light caught the angles of his face, the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his dark hair. Then you showed up. And for the first time in 2 years, I wanted to get out of bed in the morning. Eliza's throat tightened. Her hands gripped the edge of the seat, knuckles white. That ain't fair, she said. You can't put that on me. Can't make me responsible for... I ain't making you responsible for nothing. His voice was steady. I'm just telling you the truth. You asked what changed. That's what changed. You. Below them, the ranch waited in the gathering dusk. The lamp in the window glowed warm and steady, the lamp she filled each morning. The wick she trimmed each night. The smoke from the chimney rose in a thin gray line, carrying the smell of the beans she had left simmering. Her beans. Her lamp. Her curtains in the window. When had she started thinking of it as hers? I found the letters, she said. In the root cellar, the ones tied with the blue ribbon. Gideon went very still. I didn't read them, she added quickly. They weren't mine to read, but I saw the handwriting, saw who they were addressed to. Margaret Holloway. The name written in a careful, feminine script on envelope after envelope. She was writing to someone, Eliza said. A man, I think. The return addresses were all from Kansas. Gideon nodded slowly. His jaw worked. His name was William. They were going to be married. He paused. The fever took her before she could make the trip. I'm sorry. Don't be. The words were flat, automatic, the same thing he had said before. Everybody dies. But this time, his voice cracked on the last word. Eliza reached out without thinking. Her hand found his arm, the arm she had cleaned and bandaged, the arm that had caught her when she stumbled. She felt the warmth of his skin through the thin fabric of his shirt. She sounds like she was a good woman, Eliza said. The sampler, the preserves, the way she taught you to read. She left her mark on this place. She did. So did you. She squeezed his arm gently. You built the fences, fixed the roof, planted the fields. You made something here. Gideon. Something worth keeping. He looked down at her hand on his arm. His own hand came up, covered hers. The calluses on his palm rasped against her knuckles. I want you to stay, he said. I already said I would. No. He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. I mean stay, not as hired help, not as someone passing through. I mean... He stopped. His throat worked. I ain't good at this, he said. Never was. Margaret used to say I had all the charm of a fence post. Eliza laughed. The sound surprised her, rough and raw, but real. She wasn't wrong. No. The corner of his mouth twitched. She wasn't. The last sliver of sun touched the horizon. The sky blazed one final time, then began to fade toward gray. I ain't got much, Gideon said. His voice was quiet now, almost uncertain. The ranch is barely holding on. Credit's gone. Reputation's shot. I can't promise you easy. Can't promise you comfortable. Can't even promise you'll have meat on the table every night. He looked down at their joined hands. Hers were smaller than his, the fingers calloused from work, the nails broken short. "But I can promise you honest. I can promise you I'll never make you feel like less than what you are." He raised his eyes to hers. "And I can promise you'll never stand alone again. Not as long as I'm breathing." The words settled over her like a blanket, like the quilt on the bed in Margaret's room. Worn soft with years of use. She did not answer right away. She thought of Ohio, of the farmhouse where she had grown up, the smell of her grandmother's kitchen, the sound of her mother's voice calling her in for supper. She thought of the letters from Harlan Cobb, read so many times the paper had worn thin at the folds. She thought of the train platform at Copper Springs, the dust settling on her best dress, the buckboard driving away without a word. She thought of all the doors that had closed in her face, all the eyes that had slid away from her gate, all the whispers she had pretended not to hear. And she thought of this man beside her, this quiet, stubborn, broken man who had stood up in front of the whole town and called her worthy. "I reckon," she said slowly, "that's more than I ever expected." Gideon's hands tightened on hers. "Is that a yes?" "I don't know." The words came out before she could stop them. Honest words, true words. "I don't know what I'm doing. Gideon, I came out here to marry a stranger, and now I'm sitting on a ridge with a different stranger, and nothing has gone the way I thought it would." She pulled one hand free to press against her eyes. They were burning, but she was not crying. She was done with crying. "I'm scared," she said. "I'm scared of wanting this, scared of believing it's real, because every time I've wanted something in my life, it's been taken away." Gideon did not try to comfort her with pretty words. He just sat there, holding her other hand, waiting. "My grandmother used to say that fear is just love wearing a disguise." Eliza lowered her hand. "I never knew what she meant until now." The first star appeared above the eastern hills, then another, then a scatter of them, pricking through the darkening sky like needle holes in black fabric. "You asked me or told me," she said. "What?" "Back at the house. When you told me to stay, I asked if you were asking me or telling me." "I remember. You said you were asking, that you didn't have the right to tell me nothing." Gideon nodded slowly. "Well," Eliza drew a deep breath, "I'm asking you something now, and I need you to answer honest, always. Do you want me because I'm useful? Because I can cook and clean and mend? Because I keep the ranch running while you work the fields?" She held his gaze, refusing to look away. "Or do you want me because of something else?" The question hung between them. The stars multiplied overhead. The lamp in the ranch window flickered, steady and warm. Gideon reached up. His fingers touched her chin, tilting her face toward his. His thumb brushed across her cheek, rough and gentle at the same time. "I want you," he said. "Because when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I think about is hearing your voice. I want you because the house don't feel empty anymore. I want you because—" His voice caught. "Because you walked 2 miles on a bad leg to save a man you'd never met. Because you didn't give up when any sensible person would have. Because you're the strongest, stubbornest, most hard-headed woman I ever knew." His hand dropped from her face. He picked up the reins again, suddenly unable to look at her. "And because your cornbread tastes like home." Eliza stared at him. At the back of his head, the set of his shoulders, the white-knuckled grip on the leather straps. She thought about Margaret's shawl hanging on the hook by the door. the wool the color of autumn leaves. She had put it on last night without asking, had wrapped it around her shoulders when the tears came. Gideon had seen her wearing it this morning. Gideon had said nothing, because it belonged to her now, the same way the curtains belonged to her, the same way the lamp and the garden and the checkered tablecloth belonged to her, the same way he was asking her to belong to him. "Yes," she said. He turned so fast the wagon rocked. "Yes, yes." She reached out, took the reins from his hands, set them aside. "Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Gideon leaned forward. His forehead touched hers. His breath was warm on her face. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me yet. You ain't seen how I burn biscuits." He laughed. The sound was rusty. Unfamiliar, she had only heard it once before, the day they chased Sadie through the scrub. But it was real, and it was hers. She picked up the reins and handed them back to him. "Take me home," she said. The wagon rolled forward. The wheels creaked. The horses' hooves clopped against the packed earth. Below them, the ranch waited the house with its white curtains, the corral with the sleeping mare, the garden she had coaxed back to life. The lamp in the window cast a golden square of light across the porch. Margaret's sampler hung on the wall inside. The mason jars lined the shelves in the root cellar. The letters tied with blue ribbon rested in their corner, keeping their secrets. And on the hook by the door, the autumn-colored shawl waited for her shoulders. Eliza leaned against Gideon's arm as they descended the ridge. The stars spread across the sky above them, thick as spilled milk. The air smelled of sage and wood smoke, and something else, something clean and new and full of promise. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, did not know if the crops would grow, if the town would accept them, if the hard work of building a life would break them or bind them together. But she knew one thing. She was no longer standing alone on a train platform, watching her future drive away. She was going home. There is a quiet that settles after a story like this one. Not the silence of emptiness, but the kind that comes when something has been carried for a long time and finally set down. Many of us know what it means to arrive somewhere and find the door closed, to stand in an unfamiliar place and wonder if we made the wrong choice. Some of us have been the one left waiting on the platform. Others have been the one too broken to answer the knock. Perhaps you have loved someone who could not see their own worth. Perhaps you have been that someone.